email or a message came in there. We have someone from Afghanistan on the line.
Brilliant. Okay.
Years ago, I was meant to do a marathon there. Got to it. Bami in Bali, northern Afghanistan.
What time were you going for?
To finish, David. To finish. I know I'm actually not that bad. I have done ultras before.
Okay.
So I go for the jaunt to keep me away from the laptop, David.
Yeah, glutton for punishment.
That is it.
I think it would keep me away from the laptop far too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Separation anxiety.
No, I'm just more worried that my battery would die completely. I don't know if I could walk an ultra, let alone run one.
Yeah. True. Look, we're 2 minutes past. We might just kick off. Just I'm conscious that I don't want to do the whole Irish thing in terms of running over time at the end. So hello everybody and welcome. My name is David Connolly. Jen, you might give a wave there, and Mark might give a wave as well. Hello everyone, and welcome today to this afternoon. And this is the first session back of what we're hoping is a re-energized and new iteration of Startup Grind Dublin. We have Mark here today. We're going to do an introduction to Mark and a deep dive. Don't worry, we have plenty of notes here that we're going to get warts and all kind of conversation over the course of the next hour. It's great to have everybody here today. It's great to have such a diverse bunch of people that have registered to attend and even looking at stages of the journey that they're on, from pre-start right the way up to businesses that are scaling. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into a word from our sponsors. So there's just a slight little video that Jen is going to play. So if you bear with us for the next 90 seconds, slight video from AWS. I hope.
Incubators around the world. There's a reason why for the last 13 years, startups overwhelmingly prefer to be on top of AWS. We have the largest number of services, making it easy for you to take on some of the biggest challenges with the smallest teams. We also have partnerships with the top VCs, accelerators, and incubators around the world, making it easier to secure your next round of funding.
I'm a solution architect with the AWS Head Start program. What we do is we work with startups in the education sector, and we help them build their services on AWS.
So We Power Tech is AWS's diversity and inclusion outreach program. The program is really twofold. One is to increase the number of underrepresented technologists within the industry, and the second is to provide a platform for them to be seen and heard.
If you're wondering how the AWS Evangelism team might be able to help your startup, there are many ways. We're technically credible across our entire catalog of products, so we can help you figure out which services might be able to meaningfully impact your business. We also want to help tell your story. So if you're building something cool, we want to know about it and help spread that message to the world. So you might end up on stage at an event like AWS Summit. If you're a startup, you should also definitely check out the AWS Lofts. These are event spaces that are free to anyone with an AWS account. You can treat them like co-working spaces, but the awesome thing about them is that we also have people like technical evangelists like myself, solutions architects that come and give hands-on technical workshops and sessions to help you learn how to more effectively utilize the AWS products and platforms that you're already building on top of.
We are a dedicated team of people that love startups, that we just want to come and help you with whatever we can, whether it be technical or business focused. We are here to help guide you and make sure that you do have a say in what's going on. We do get your feedback. We do bring that feedback to the service teams. That is what we're here for.
Jen, thank you. So look, as I mentioned, Startup Grind is a global community for entrepreneurs. It is designed to help educate, to inspire, and to connect entrepreneurs and to build and strengthen that ecosystem. And we felt with our first event of 2021, what better way to do that than with a speaker from Stripe. So for those of you that I'm sure are aware of it, and there's maybe one or two that aren't, of a much lauded Irish success story, I'm going to give a brief introduction to the company, and I'm going to give a brief introduction to Mark's role within the organization, and then we're going to kick off with a kind of a fireside chat. okay? And both Jen and myself will be asking questions throughout it, so Mark will be getting them from all angles, okay? So, quick summary of Stripe. It's an Irish-American financial services company that works as software as a service, and is headquartered between San Francisco and Dublin. So again, that's another reason why Startup Grind Dublin felt that it was beneficial to do today. It was founded in 2010 by Irish brothers Patrick and John Collison, and I believe it was initially named as Dev Payments. Would I be correct in saying that, Mark? Great, brilliant. Research 10 out of 10. Company had its initial raise in 2011 with a number of seriously high-profile investors that included the likes of Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and indeed Irish entrepreneur from this parish, slightly further south in Ireland, Liam Casey. Okay, not located there currently. Since then, the companies went on to colossal success that we're going to discuss over the course of the next hour. Current estimates are there's a workforce of over 2,500. The company was valued at 22.5 billion in 2019, and in March of this year, valuations have placed that as many multiples with various sources, listing that as a 95 billion valuation. Our guest today, he needs no introduction. He's been there on that journey for the last 7 years since joining in 2015. Mark has held roles as account manager, head of professional services, and indeed was area manager of the Benelux region throughout Stripe. So Mark has had a number of different roles throughout the last 7 years, but his current role, and something that we felt was beneficial to chat about today, was he currently is head of EMEA, startups, and SMB at Stripe. So can we give a warm bullabus to Mark? Mark, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Having me. Great to be here.
Great. Okay, look, there's been a lot of success since you've joined the organization, and it must be something that you're very proud of. I know a lot of Irish people, it's a company that resonates with them, and I know for myself, from working in kind of startups and supporting them, it's always that company that companies look to for inspiration. Maybe not aspire to, but certainly look to inspiration for. It must be something that you really enjoy in terms of your day-to-day workings within the organization. It must be something that you get a great buzz from.
Absolutely. I mean, to get to work at a company with, very committed people, that has a mission that I care about, that there is a meaningful impact on the global economy and businesses and citizens as a result. And of course, as a proud Irishman, has very, very strong roots here in Ireland. So yeah, it's a very, very rewarding, has been a very, very rewarding experience for me.
Brilliant. And look, Mark, obviously this isn't your first, you've worked in different organizations, and I know from anybody, and I'm sure you're going to be getting the clicks on the LinkedIn in terms of people wanting to connect afterwards, that you've had a vastly experienced background in terms of working with other large tech organizations, and indeed kind of, I think you were involved in kind of the radio industry as well, and Golden Pages, would I be correct in saying as well?
You've been doing your research.
That must have been some change for yourself in terms of those. Like, you obviously took bits with you from each one of those organizations, but that was certainly something that brought you to this point. Yeah,
absolutely. My whole career, I actually originally wanted to be a rock star, and I still do. That's definitely on the cards at some stage. But, interestingly, as you kind of go through your career, or at least interestingly for me, I kind of found myself in jobs, found myself in companies quite opportunistically and not in a very planful way, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend. It's turned out okay, thankfully, but one of the first, excuse me. Well, after folding jeans in Roche's stores in Henry Street, which doesn't even exist anymore, my first proper job was working at Aircell, which is now Vodafone. I started there in customer service, and I moved through the organization into technical support and then product management. And I worked on one of the first projects I worked on there actually was was the development of Aircell's website to sell prepaid mobile phones, which at the time, this is 1999 in Ireland at the time, there was about 10% internet penetration all through dial-up. So you could hear your phone being presented to you before you could see it. It was a very, very different place, really. But this was like an introduction into e-commerce and technology. The e-commerce team was kind of looked upon with great skepticism among the others in the company. We were a 3-person team. I was the very lowest level of that 3-person team as well, as just playing a supporting role. But it was a great academy, actually, just to learn about technology, learn about business, and then also kind of get a glimpse into the future. And for a couple more years, I worked at Aircell/Vodafone, as we were acquired by Vodafone, in various kind of e-commerce, internet-related projects. And it was, even at the time in the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, we were dreamers in those teams, in those kind of projects, thinking about how great it would be if just, phones did more stuff other than text, and, if the internet was better. And we kind of had a vision of the future of what like payments and e-commerce and everything could be if only we got to, a certain better stage. Like, again, that project that I worked on, setting up that website, it took about 15 months. I think, to actually get it live. We were one of the first companies, if not the first company, I think, to work with a PSP, as it was known at the time, to get access to, accepting credit card payments online. And of that 15 months, about 12 months of that was tied up in getting a merchant account with the bank, getting the PSP set up, just being able to accept payments. And that actually was the same experience for companies in Ireland until 2013, when Stripe launched. It still take months to do that stuff, and then it's something you can do in a matter of minutes. But yeah, quite a lot has changed. I moved from there into a complete change of direction. I went into radio. I was, I guess, connecting, getting closer maybe to that rock star dream. But really, what it was about for me at the time was I felt like I needed more of a connection with companies and with my customers, working in Vodafone, which again, it was a wonderful experience, but it was quite internally focused. And so I wanted to broaden that experience. And so what better way to do that than to go and sell, radio ads to car dealerships on the Nace Road. It will teach you something pretty quickly about how to sharpen your selling skills. I bounced around a bit after that, worked in a company called Orbiscom, which was since acquired by MasterCard. That was an internet first payments company, and actually, set a lot of standards for payments. An Irish company set a lot of standards for payments beyond that, tokenization and things like that. After that, back in radio, worked in Golden Pages for a while, and actually the Golden Pages was the point at which I realized that traditional media as we knew it in the kind of mid-2000s was on shaky ground, and I was trying to sell ads in the Golden Pages, and buyers were saying, actually, I'm going to shift some of my budget onto Google this year. So that was a kind of moment for me to get curious about Google, which I did, and spent 7 years there, and then moved into Stripe.
Good. Mark, I'm going to ask, before anybody puts the question up, what's your instrument of choice? You mentioned the rockstar lifestyle.
It's guitar. Inevitably, of course it is. I work in technology. Come on, it's,
So, lead guitarist, that's where we see ourselves at. Have we the vocals to back it up as well?
Listen, I wouldn't be shy.
Perfect. Folks, if we hang on after 4 or 3 o'clock, we might do a bit of a duet.
I didn't say I'd be good. I just said I wouldn't be shy. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And look, keeping with that rockstar team, in terms of like, certainly will be considered like the success and the profile of a rockstar is equivalent to the success and the profile that Stripe has had. And it's quite interesting just to hear your background in terms of, you've mentioned obviously selling the adverts on the, was it the Nace Road or Long Mile Road? Sorry.
Both, actually.
Yeah, perfect. It's interesting to get that validation piece on how so many points had taken you, like on your journey, had taken you to a point that brought you here. It was almost serendipitous, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like for I would say, I'm probably showing my own age here. I remember my first time, in terms of my first phone was what I consider the David Beckham phone. If anyone remembers the sharp flip phone, yeah, you're probably involved in some sort of sales process around that. But that's my first one. But going back to your journey and your current role, so your title is head of startups and SMB for the EMEA region. Can you just talk us through what's a day-to-day role like there, and does it differ from a day-to-day role for the other 2,499 staff that are involved in Stripe?
Yeah, it may be different for other folks there. I think, the journey at Stripe has been it's been extremely fast-paced. I think that's one thing that I can, say, which will not be controversial in any way and probably not surprising to most people. I joined when we were just over 300 people. We were about a dozen people in Dublin, maybe a couple of dozen people in Europe. And the job at the time, I'd spent some time at Google before that. The job at the time was to kind of build the account management team for EMEA. And what that involved was like literally build that team from scratch, so hire the people. And so for the first 6 months, I spent my time, managing accounts, selling to new customers and new prospects, managing inbound queues and support tickets and stuff like that. And that was actually probably the most important 6 months of my career at Stripe. Even now, I still consider that to have been the kind of the foundation to the next few years, because that whole experience taught me not just about our own company and our own culture and our product, and being scrappy and creating stuff out of little. But I met loads of companies. I spoke to more people. I spoke to more companies at Stripe in my first 7 weeks than I did in 7 years at Google, which is more of an indictment actually about the time I spent at Google than it is about Stripe. But I learned a ton about startups. Again, you kind of coming from Google to Stripe, where you think, okay, look, we're a product first company. We share similar values insofar as, we care about users first. We care about creating impact, for businesses and for consumers at large. And, organizationally as well, there's a kind of tech philosophy, if you like, around people development and talent development and stuff like that. And so naively, I thought going from what was a 70,000 person organization to a 300 person organization would be like, changing role or something like that within the same company. And it was obviously extremely naive. I realized quickly that I still knew about sales. I still knew about managing teams. I still knew a bit about technology and payments, but I knew very little about startups. I didn't have a team to manage. I was finding customers to sell to, apart from customers that were coming our way, of course. So, when you're in that space where there's a lot of kind of white space around you and then loads of stuff to do, you really learn a ton. So that was really transformational for me. Going through the years, the stuff that I found myself doing at Stripe, some of the roles that you mentioned, like head of account management for a while. I started up our professional services team. I did Benelux for a while. Those three things were concurrent at one point because we needed to do those things, and we weren't at a scale where we had lots and lots of people and lots and lots of resources to kind of throw at that. And am I sad that I had to do 3 jobs? Absolutely not. I mean, for me personally, I learned a ton. Again, learned so much in doing all of that. But also, it was the right thing for Stripe to do at the time, which is like, let's just try and do as much as we can with what we have and be really thoughtful about it, rather than maybe follow some of the patterns or habits, or maybe even mistakes that others have tried and paid for. Up to now, what I do today, like my team is based in Dublin. We also have startup partner leads, which are folks that work with investors and accelerators and co-working spaces dotted around the region as well, mostly in person, obviously not for the last little while. But that team is kind of, if you like, very focused on the founder and investor community and network, if you like, and how that attaches to Stripe. I have a team then that focuses on sales and account management as well, so selling to new potential users for Stripe, and then also managing existing users. And so my day-to-day really is to try and figure out, are we doing the very best things that we can for those users, helping them to make the most out of Stripe? Are we building the organization in the right way, in a responsible way, in a way that can scale and grow and be sustained? And so the time that I'm not spending talking to customers, I'm thinking about the company. How do we grow the company? How do we scale the business? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I get you. You're kind of lifting yourself up and focusing on that strategic stuff. And look, I always believe it's great, and it strikes me that you're very much in the deep end kind of learner in terms of getting that feedback. And I think it's Bill All always references in his kind of 24-step entrepreneurship process that's the best piece, is getting that feedback, and it's cheap. It's very, very cheap. Now it might take a personal toll on you if they're criticizing what you're doing, but look, that's okay. That's fine. And like that's a valuable kind of lesson that I would always kind of suggest that people take away from dealing with large companies, is looking at that ideation process, and that, for want of a better word, or want of a better description, it's fine-tuning the pencil, because you're constantly getting that information back and that flow, but it's what you do with it when it comes inside, and they're saying these are the challenges that we have. So look,
it's much more. Sorry, Dave. Just quickly on that, because I think it's a really important point. It's much better to take a little bit of hard criticism and maybe feel a little bit, bad about yourself, rather than go really far down the road and be hurting because of losing money or laying people off or whatever it might be, because you made poor decisions because your ego couldn't handle a bruising. One of the things I think that founders, startups, neglect at their peril, of course, not all of them, but I think by not doing this, you are putting yourself in a perilous position, is not actively going and engaging with your first users, whoever they are, whatever that product is. It's especially today, because of the availability of technology and how easy it is to create stuff, be a creator in anything. It's easy to create something and then kind of lob it over the fence and then see what the feedback is, and kind of, hopefully it goes well and it'll be fine. Excuse me. And I can iterate on that based on data. I mean, yeah, sometimes that works out. I think for businesses, like, let's say today you're building a SaaS product, right? Who are your users? What do they say? What do they want to see? What do they hate about your product? Oh, by the way, they don't care about your product. They care about their business right now. And you really need to kind of force your way into those relationships with a handful of trusted testers, people that can take your product, take your idea, beat the daylights out of us, and then help you improve us. And I think, if you're not doing that, if you're not throwing yourself into the deep end, similar to selling, I mean, the best way to learn how to sell to somebody is talk to them and figure out the thing that they ask you that you don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I'll go and find that out. Yeah, I think they're similar.
True. Okay, look, folks, we're going to shift it up a bit. I'm going to pass the baton over to Jen. Just before I do it, I will just kind of a little bit of housekeeping. On the right-hand side of your screens, your right-hand side, there's a Q&A session. I'll be monitoring that, so if you have any questions, we'll get them kind of spoken through or looked after throughout the kind of presentation. Okay? Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, David. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfectly.
How to follow on from that? Golden pages, 90s nostalgia, prepaid mobile phones, rockstar ambitions.
It's all in there. It's all in there.
Yeah.
The book is coming soon.
Yeah. I'm the boring, structured part of the event, but needs must. I always find, though, it's fascinating. I don't know, not to get poetic, but there's a Robert Frost poem, "And Two Roads Diverged," and like the different choices you make, where you start off and where you end up, are really fascinating. I think, particularly people in business, because where they are, I mean, they've had to try so many different routes, and then they finally end up where they're at. But it's could be a million miles away from where they were. Anyhow, I was trying to think of something just there, and I didn't have time to Google it. I feel like I remembered hearing something about the Coulson brothers when they first started out. They actually would sit down with people to test the product, and they would work through it. There's an actual term for it. I can't, for the life of me, think of the phrase, but I'll look it up afterwards, unless you happen to know it, Mark.
Probably pair coding or something like that, where you sit alongside the person and you develop.
Possibly, but I mean, there were no airs and graces. It was literally just sit down, we figure out how it works and help them. It was very practical. And I think when you're a startup or someone starting out in business, you have to let go of the ego and you have to figure out what works for the customer.
Yeah.
But it's hard, and you have to be really determined, keep going and push through. Anyhow, back to business. So to give a bit of context for the event, we do have a short enough time frame, so I'll try and get Mark speaking as much as possible and answering any questions that David said would be coming in. So if you have any questions as we go, David can call them out, and then any general questions we can keep to the end. But for the actual the event itself, the topic was how to build a successful startup through Stripe. With millions of businesses of all sizes, from startups to large enterprises, using Stripe software and API to accept payments, send payouts, and manage their business online. The goal really is just to kind of gain some insights from you, Mark, on how you can grow your business, win more customers, and reduce churn through Stripe, through payments more generally. Now, that's both a very simple question and also a very, very large question, depending on how you look at it. As David mentioned earlier, our audience is quite a mixed bag. So you've got people who are at the idea stage, you've got people who are building, people who are launching, people who are up and go further along. They have a few rounds of funding behind them. So I'll leave it up to you and your expertise to maybe figure out how to look at that. And I think I know you have talked quite often before around, SaaS companies, and we can drill down and maybe talk, because I know we do a lot of business in that space, and a lot of your customers would be SaaS companies. But maybe before that, just maybe more generally, how startups can use Stripe
Sure, from school.
Hello.
Yeah, so I mean, look, for anyone who needs to drop off early, the summary answer to all of this is just use Stripe. So I'll save you a bit of time. If you want a bit more information on why that is, I'm only half joking, by the way. I mentioned earlier just how difficult it was for businesses. Like 2013 is not that long ago, just how hard it was just to accept payments, right? And I sometimes think about payments. There aren't many kids, I know I wasn't anyway, one of them, I think, that wakes up and thinks one day I really want to work in payments and that's going to be the thing that I do for my career. It wasn't something 8 years ago, 10, 20, 30 years ago that was really top of mind for a lot of people, or at least, the structures that were in place made it so difficult to be top of mind that it was just one of those things that you kind of kind of bulldozed your way through, managed in some way, accepted that the cost was going to be the cost, and then just kind of did it. But similarly, I think 10 years ago, if somebody was starting up their own business, they rented the room they were in, and they rented the room next door for a bunch of servers, maybe not 10 years ago, maybe longer, but now everything like that just goes on AWS. And so I think, I think it just as a kind of a reminder to folks, payments is actually it's a relatively complex thing to do well. I think just, we've gotten it to a state now And thanks again to technology and, you know, apps and phones and broadband and all of that kind of stuff. But we've got it to a stage now where it looks really easy and almost kind of one of those kind of basic human right type of, you know, frictionless experiences like broadband or Wi-Fi or something like that. The thing to know first is if you are starting a company and you're thinking about what should my payment strategy be, your payment strategy should be go and talk to Stripe. I mean, again, I'm obviously going to talk about Stripe. There are many ways to do this, but your payment strategy should not be, do you know what, I'm going to try and figure out how to do this again from scratch, because that takes way too much of your time. It's going to take your energy. It's going to take your money. And there are lots of complex things that go in there. It's not just, do I take credit cards, but, you know, what about currency? What about conversion? Where does that money go when I take it? What about compliance and regulation and storing card details and all of that? And like pretty quickly you're into like 30 or 40 fairly non-trivial pieces of admin that you have to tackle just before you can start accepting payments. So the first piece of advice for any business is don't do that, you know, get us to do it, or at least think about a way that doesn't involve you doing it. But you know, that's what Stripe has spent its time figuring out. And that again, actually was a friction that Patrick and John themselves encountered when they were trying to set up their own business. It's like, this is just way too hard. What if we made it not hard? What if we made it easy? So that's the first thing. I think I talked there about making it like a frictionless experience and a nice experience and a pleasurable experience. Like our job actually and our goal is to make these experiences like surprisingly great, like delightful experiences. When somebody comes onto a website that uses Stripe or onto an app that uses Stripe, it's like, it's great, it's fun, you know, but it's at the very least something you never need to think about because it's just so easy. You know, it's such an easy interaction. And that's the kind of thing that you want to be able to create for users. That's the kind of experience that you want to be able to create for users. Again, it's well documented that any amount of dwell time anywhere in a purchase process just increases the chance that purchase won't happen. And that could be dwell time on your checkout process. It could be dwell time just even in discovery on your site or in your app in the first place. And so you want to minimize that. You want to reduce that as much as you possibly can. So you want to create a really nice checkout experience. Again, we have tools like Checkout, which is a hosted payment experience, very easy to use, very easy to set up, customizable to your taste, looks great and works great. And it does all of the thinking, you know, for you on how to take payments. We've even brought that product to a level now where you can include local payment methods that are not kind of maybe germane to the market you're in now, but are to the market where you're going. So accept ideal payments or so forth or something like that. And all of those little tweaks, which again, as a consumer, are kind of almost expected. Those are really hard things to do as a developer or as a founder or as a business. And yes, you know, again, with a product like Checkout on Stripe, we just do that and you don't need to think about that. And why that's important is because there is payments, I think, is a strategic opportunity for businesses. It's not just the thing I do to get money. It's a strategic advantage. It's also a strategic disadvantage, by the way. It's a competitive disadvantage if you do it badly. The ones that do it really well, you remember that experience and you go there again as a consumer because it was just easy to do. You know, again, think about your favorite app or your favorite payment experience or that one-click experience, whatever that might have been. You want to do that again because you don't want to be rooting through your wallet for your card and yada, yada, all of that kind of stuff. So payments is a strategic advantage and competitive advantage. And founders really should, I think about it that way. Businesses of all sizes should think about it in that way. It's not just about the experience for the consumer, but think about this as revenue. And if you think about like the stages of revenue generation through payments, those are you know, the presentment piece, like how do I show up? What's my checkout flow look like? Is it nice? Does it present the payment options that my user wants? Am I consumer wants to see. Once they decide to pay, what's the chance that that's going to be a good transaction and not a fraudulent transaction? What's the chance that that's going to go through and be authorized and not be declined? Again, those are things that you shouldn't need to think about, because again, unless you're setting up a payments company, that's just the thing that should happen. And again, using products like Checkout, or like Radar, Stripe Radar, which is our fraud prevention tool, or adaptive acceptance, which is a machine learning that happens in the background. All of those things are just, again, the checkout experience for the customer. You don't even need to know the names of them necessarily, but what you should understand is the role that they play in making that a more profitable experience for you. And we've done, when I say profitable, I really mean profitable. We've done lots and lots of research. We've had, customers come back and tell us, just how important some of these enhancements and iterations have been for them. There's a business called Skip the Dishes, which is like a food delivery platform. They used our adaptive acceptance product in their conversion, and they improved conversions by 6%. That means they added 6% more orders to their basket and completed orders. 6%, that's 6% more money. Again, not to simplify it, but that's what that means. That's what that means. If you look at Irish company Let's Get Checked has seen explosive growth over the last year, unsurprisingly because of the pandemic. They've grown 800% or something year on year in that process. They use Radar for fraud teams, which is our fraud prevention tool. And people think of fraud prevention as, these are the rules I put in place to stop David buying something from me, or to stop, consumer using this thing buying from me. That's not how they see it at all. Actually, they see this as, we don't want to block charges unnecessarily. We don't want any of those kind of false negatives, false positives, where something is showing up as a potentially fraudulent user when actually it's not. And Radar uses machine learning basically to understand patterns of behavior. We see consumers across our network all the time. We see cards across our network all the time. And we know how transactions should work. And we have built the logic and the technology and the machine learning behind that, which means that you don't have to think about rules. You can add rules if you like, but you don't have to think about it. And so actually you think about Radar as not a thing that blocks charges, but a thing that makes more charges happen, because it knows how to do that efficiently.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Let's Get Checked as an example, and COVID. I mean, from the companies that you're working with, so in your role, but more broadly with Stripe, I mean, I suppose it really doesn't even need to be said, but the amount of change in the last year. I mean, what are the big differences? I mean, are you statistically, and just observations from the companies you're working with, how they're using Stripe? Are they using more, or are they just concentrating on more on specific services? I think not just Stripe, I mean like payments, in how they're going. I mean, because everyone's being pushed to go online, to be, even the likes of the local enterprise office, which David can attest to, they're really, really driving people online. So I'm not even sure if it's a valid question, because it's almost doesn't need to be said. But I mean, what are you seeing from those you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's like you say. It's kind of like you've kind of asked and answered in some way. The businesses that have been affected by COVID, have found their way online. But there are. I'll simplify it into like a couple of different cohorts, if you like. We saw a massive spike, and we published this data last year. Actually, we saw a massive spike in businesses signing up to Stripe. Pretty quickly around the second quarter, around this time last year, and then in a sustained way across the year, particularly in the kind of small and medium business space, right? Because again, think about who those businesses are. Some of them are, fewer than 10 people, some of them maybe a little bit more, but maybe working in traditional industries. And essentially their whole consumer audience has been literally locked out of their shop. And so the way to keep the business, on rails and keep paying people is to find other ways to do that. And so we saw a huge amount of businesses come online and supported actually, government incentives like online retail scheme and the trade voucher scheme, trading voucher scheme. So those actually were very positive trends. It's kind of like the thing that we all hoped would happen. I mean, we, society at large, the availability of these things in an easier way, it came by a circuitous and unexpected and unpleasant route for many. But actually it was, I think, it's kind of like the unexpected upside of something so dramatic happening, in our lives, that many businesses have been able to prevail by going online. There's a great example we talk about, which is a company called Flying Elephant. Flying Elephant is a marketing and events company, and so the kind of company that would produce stands for trade shows and exhibitions and things like that. And they found themselves like literally overnight with a book of cancellations because no events can happen anymore, and a warehouse full of stock of plywood and MDF and, stuff like that. And what are they going to do with it? And they, very quickly decided they pivoted the organization to creating stuff that is useful for remote workers, like stand-up desks. I have one myself.
I've actually ordered from these guys.
Right.
I knew the name. It rang a bell, but I couldn't.
And I mean, the first thing is like, what an extraordinary insight and what an extraordinary idea just to be able to pivot. But they were able to get the business online in hours using Stripe. Just kind of, we're going to do this thing. Let's just create a website and let's go. And now I think actually, if I'm not mistaken, if you look at their website today, you'll see that is still a huge part of what they do and probably forevermore part of what that business is. And so for kind of, not your typical innovation-driven enterprise or startup or tech-forward startup, just for SMBs, this move to online has been transformational, and I think positive in a lot of ways for many, at least for those who are able to do it. What's interesting on the startup side of things is that it has, in a similar way to the global financial crisis, 10, 12 years ago, where, all of a sudden people are renting out their room, or kind of giving, strangers a lift in their car. That gig economy came out of that. And what's come out of this is innovative new ways to do the things that you would do in the normal run of your day. For example, telemedicine saw an explosive growth last year. With like video consultations with doctors and of course people not being able to go into a surgery but still needing that care. Telemedicine just became a really big thing. And again, those businesses powered by Stripe Connect actually is the platform specifically where you have a platform, let's say like a doc planner, that takes offers a kind of a surgery as a service, if you like. I'm not sure what they would call it. I'm probably butchering that, but essentially what it allows is GPs and medical practices to operate online and to take money from patients through this platform. And so the platform is Connect that takes that money in and then pays that out. But again, an industry that there were businesses thinking about this, but were supercharged and accelerated because of the conditions last year and the conditions we're in now. And similarly then, stuff that you just wouldn't imagine, like ordering, eat in, dining when we still could eat in, and that will happen again. But rather than kind of, handling menus and cash and stuff like that, order at and pay at table platforms sprung up out of the ground and, service thousands of restaurants in a way that is more efficient now for the restaurants and a better experience for the consumer.
Sold. I'm sold. There you go. Job done, Mark.
Thanks.
Totally agree with that. That's great. You touched on a few different things there, different types of companies. I mean, obviously your remit is over SMB and startup. And then within startup, I suppose you have people operating different areas, but you have B2C versus B2B.
Yeah.
And in terms of your services, we can certainly follow up with more information if there are certain things you've mentioned, like you mentioned that report last year, or if there are bits of information we can send on to all those on the call and our members in general. Sure. But is there a big difference in the services that you offer for the SMBs versus B2C companies versus the B2B SaaS products, or can it all be customized to the different, depending on your circumstances and your size?
I couldn't have asked a better pitchy question myself.
Oh no, I wasn't trying to go there.
No,
just curious.
You. Sorry, let me just get my notes out. I think the thing with Stripe, again, if you're building a company and you're building a product-focused company and you're following your customers, then the product rarely stays the same, at least not over the lifetime of a business that is successful. Amazon is a great example of that. Google is a great example of that. Even Google Search actually is a great example of that. Google Search looks like the same experience that you remember from 20 years ago, but it's vastly different, right? Okay, you just type the stuff into the box or you say the thing into the phone or whatever, but it's vastly different in how that has developed and become more sophisticated and become better. And similarly, kind of the approach that we take to payments is a product-first approach, which is we build a product that literally millions of businesses around the world use and can use, and many millions more can use it. But we build it in such a way that it is easy to use, it's easy to integrate, and it evolves without you needing to necessarily evolve. So your single integration will, as we open up new countries, we're in 45 countries today, as we open up the next one, you don't need a new integration. That market just becomes available to you. As we add another payment method, you don't need to do anything. It just becomes available to you. You can select whether or not you want to use it. But similarly, the business has come a long way, even in the time that I've been here, where payments and Connect, if you like, that marketplace, multi-sided platform product that I mentioned, those were kind of the core, if you like, of Stripe and the thing that Stripe became very well known for. But of course, if you're a subscription business now, we offer a billing suite, which is essentially a tool that manages your recurring payments. It even does smart retries for you. So when people don't pay or subscriptions bounce back, we'll retry them for you. Again, these are readily available, easy to use products, regardless of the size of the business that you operate. We've launched a bunch of new products over the last couple of years, but just even over the last few months, if you look at issuing, which is a card issuing product, again, a surprising product. Maybe some people think about, well, what is the application for that product? If you're a delivery service, for example, something like a Deliveroo, let's say, you can, or a Lyft, let's say, you can give your drivers cards that they can then go and buy the thing or refuel their car or whatever it might be. And you're managing all that expense in the dashboard in Stripe without kind of having to do payroll and cash and checks and all of that kind of stuff. So these are like surprising advancements, I think, that are really, really easy to use, but also have great applicability. You don't need to be an enterprise to take advantage of these kind of pretty powerful and incredible tools. And again, back to that kind of competitive advantage. If you're doing that thing and your competitor isn't, and you're doing it without having really to think about it because we're taking that lift off you, you're presenting yourself with more revenue. You're presenting yourself with better customer experiences. You're improving your business in that way. And just one final point really is that, like, our aim is always to build a product that startups or enterprises can use. And we have both startups and enterprises on our books, very many of them across the spectrum, and they all use the same thing. They all use the same product. The customization is maybe if they want to stick their own brand on us or their own logo on us, but essentially it's the same set of documentation, the same APIs, the same integration.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I have a list of questions as long as my arm, which I could ask you, but we end up going into tomorrow. I'm mindful that we do have a number of questions from the audience. So what I would say is that we can follow up with more information from you, or people can reach out, and we will do that in the follow-up. I think you've touched on a lot of the points you've made have overlapped with other points just by the nature of the examples you were giving. So I think
you're saying I talk too much, Jim.
Not at all. You're very easy to listen to. Not at all. But I want to make sure we definitely get some questions in. So maybe David, if you want to kick off with the questions from the audience.
Managing the chat function there, I suppose 10 out of 10 for Ian Keeney, who squeezed in a question with a compliment wrapped around it. So fair play there. His question was, what kind of camera are you using? Because the resolution is excellent.
Thank you, Ian. It's a Logitech, I think 920 or 930, something like that. Something I'll find out and I will follow up.
Perfect. We'll send that out to all our users. I'm not sure that was the information that we're looking for, but brilliant. It's great to get those kind of questions. So thanks. Niall Larkin just was again in terms of your piece about the initial trialing of technology that Stripe underwent. Nicknamed the Colliston install, where they would take the laptop of the person that said they couldn't download the software and do it with them. Thank you very much for that contribution, Niall. A couple of quick questions. Luke Teeling is asking, currently using Stripe, but what is the biggest mistake you see, Mark, in your role that Stripe users are making when selling online?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. And I think there are probably different answers to it, but I'm going to bring it back to the customer, because it often comes down to a misalignment of expectations with the customer. Simple things like are you clear about your terms and conditions with your delivery, right? Are you when something can be expected to be delivered? Are you clear with your terms and conditions when it comes to things like refund policies? And again, I know these sound like pretty basic customer service things, but assuming that you have the integration right, okay, assuming that you're optimizing the check. I'll come back to that in a second, but assuming you're doing those things, it often comes down to customer expectation. Did I get the thing that I wanted, right? One of the killers for businesses, especially small businesses, is if you get a chargeback or a dispute, right? So I go and buy something from your shop. It either doesn't arrive or it doesn't arrive as I expected. I try and get in contact with you, and I don't have any joy on that. Now, the cheapest thing probably for you, if we got in contact, is for you to give me a refund, right? Or ask me to send it back, whatever, but it's probably for you to give me a refund. By the way, I'm not saying just everybody go give refunds to everyone, but just think about the economics for 1 second. Let's imagine you don't give me a refund and then I dispute that charge with my bank. I'm getting my money back, and I'm getting €15 in a chargeback fee for that as well, for administrative fees that end up going to the card network. So as a seller, you're down the cost of the product, or at least the cost that the customer paid for the product. So you're down the retail price of the product. You're down 15 quid in an administrative fee. You're probably down postage and packaging as well. So just being really clear on what your service delivery is. You'd be surprised at the amount of people who end up kind of losing a lot of money because it's just not clear what it is that they're providing. And it doesn't take a lot of chargebacks or a lot of disputes for you to be in pretty negative territory when it comes to profitability. So that's the first thing. Be super, super, super clear what it is you're providing, what customers can expect, and make it really easy for them to complain to you, and make it really easy to solve their problems. When it comes to mistakes on things like checkout or conversion or anything like that, again, it comes down to research. Ask your customers, what way do they want to pay? You know, do they want to pay using a credit card or a debit card? Do they want to use Apple Pay? Do they want to pay with a, you know, a credit transfer or with a local payment method? And again, I'm not suggesting, by the way, that you just, you know, spew all of those payment methods onto a checkout, but you refine that over time. Again, Stripe Checkout will help you do that. We actually, you know, help refine those payment methods all the time. But you know, kind of launch and iterate, learn from the feedback that you're getting, pay attention to the payment methods that are that, you know, cause a conversion more likely than not. What are the ones that cause friction in your checkout process? Get rid of them. Optimize for profitability. Some payment methods are more expensive than others. You know, credit card charges tend to be higher than debit card. They tend to be higher than some bank transfer methods. So find the ways that give you both coverage for your customers, but optimize for conversion and I think ultimately cost as well. I mean, I wouldn't optimize for cost over conversion. I would go for conversion first. That's your profitability right there. And
Cool.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
I have one more specific one. Anna Carmody, founder of Little Red Edu. I actually know Anna, so hello Anna, good to see you. So we are targeting the Asian market with an educational platform for early learners to learn and speak English. This might be a very specific question, but a Stripe global. And is there any difficulty in using this when targeting the Chinese market?
Good question. We're not available in China locally today, but you can, of course, sell into China from Ireland. You can sell into China from 44 other countries where Stripe has a presence as well. So you can sell cross-border into those markets. It's not. It's a common approach. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Really quick one as well from me, Dorothy. I know she's to drop off in 2 minutes. Dorothy from Sidekick Media. We are a digital marketing agency, work primarily with helping businesses make money online. We're working with lots of businesses right now who are delivering online courses, growing paid online communities and such. Can Mark speak to us about using Stripe to support a free trial for online services and growing a recurring income stream? She understands there's a Stripe plugin for WordPress that enables a free trial element to services. For example, as a marketing tool, a business could offer a free trial for an online paid community or online course. Customer adds their credit card details and payment won't start until after a specified time. She'd like to hear how other businesses are using this as a marketing tool.
So I'm not sure I get the full question. Is it how do businesses offer free trials as a marketing tool?
She said that we would have many clients that would benefit from this option with Stripe. I think, yeah, it is around how to, as a marketing tool, a business could offer a free trial for an online paid community or online course, more maybe to understand how that works from a Stripe perspective.
I'm not familiar with the, so if I might be reading this wrong. I'm not sure about the WordPress offer or the Stripe offer with WordPress specifically, but I'm happy to come back to you on that.
Yeah.
I think if you're talking about like, how do you incentivize or how do you bring, you know, users onto a platform using promotions? I think it really depends on what the business is and what the business is trying to achieve. I think incentives, interestingly, actually, you know, lots of companies, you know, Stripe included, but AWS, Microsoft, you know, through investors will usually offer incentives and fee discounts for businesses starting up, right? And so I'm using this as a parallel for what I think the question is, you know, do you incentivize by offering free stuff? Quite often, actually, what happens is the perks aren't redeemed. The customer will still use the product, but actually they care more about the product than they do about the incentive. So I think the point I'm trying to make is no matter what you're offering for free, make sure that the value proposition is really, really super clear so that they can understand what, if they were to pay for it, which inevitably they may need to do if this is a free trial, make sure that that is super compelling.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up with Dorothy in. She said she'll listen to the recording. Thank you very much. I have another question from Tom from Avoca Seafood. He would like to know if Stripe invests in companies. So I'm guessing that is linked to the investment in Nigeria's Paystack Like, is that a thing, or is it more where there's a clear alignment on the payments front?
Well, I think, look, you know, we invested in Paystack. We acquired Paystack. We've, you know, recently announced an investment in a company called TaxJar as well, or an acquisition of a company called TaxJar. Typically, where you see Stripe, you know, in this market is where, as you say, Jen, there's a really clear alignment, and the alignment is like the thing that we're trying to achieve when we work with companies like Paystack or TaxJar, is we're trying to increase the functionality and the utility of our stack, right? What we want to do is to make payments and, you know, economic infrastructure and economic tools as easy to use and as integrated and as frictionless as possible. And that's typically how we think about investment.
Okay.
Perfect.
I have a few more questions, but is there one, David, coming to mind?
No, look, it's a personal one. I'm just conscious of timing, so maybe just in a really quick one. You mentioned in terms of your experience with Vodafone that you were perceived as kind of that disruptor and that marginalized community in terms of doing something new, and that's quite prevalent in terms of disruptive technology that Stripe is bringing to a quite traditional sector in terms of automating the process. How has that helped you, or what do you see as comparisons there that you took from that?
It's a good question. I don't. I think one of the things that I think is really important if you're going to be a disruptor is that you need to have a thick skin. I don't think there are, again, I don't know if many people kind of grow up thinking my mission is to be disruptive. You know, I think most people kind of think, or founders that spot an opportunity, it's usually out of some necessity and some friction that they can't get past themselves, and they see an opportunity to disrupt by creating something better. And so, but in doing that, you need to be resilient, and you need to persevere. You know, I think about disruption and think about, you know, ride hailing or you know, accommodation sharing, or, you know, delivery networks, or any of those kind of things. Like, you know, Uber, Airbnb, and Deliveroo weren't the first companies to do that. They happen to be some of the best companies to do that, but that's because they execute extraordinarily well. You know, the idea is one thing, but the execution is absolutely the key to this. And so I think in the same ways, like, disruptive ideas are useless. Disruptive ideas that are executed extremely well with perseverance and hard work and resilience are more likely to be successful.
Brilliant. Look, I think that's a brilliant, successful, I think, is a brilliant way to end it. Like, we've covered on everything from radio advertising to music to your experience to the journey that Stripe has went on. We could talk all day, and that's not just my own personal opinion. That's judging from the interaction that we've been getting on the chat. That's judging from the number of questions that we got prior today. From a personal viewpoint, from both Jen and myself, thank you very much. Stripe has went through phenomenal success over the last while, and we'd actually like to give you a present from a sector that has also went through phenomenal success. So I don't know if people can see that, but there's a bottle of whiskey that is winging its way to you.
Fantastic.
As a little thank you. So look, Mark, thank you very much. It was great to have you on. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of follow-up afterwards. Look, very much thank you for today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been really fun.
Brilliant.
And
thank you.
Just before we go, David, just to let people know that the next event is on May 20th. It's David Spinks of CMX, founder of CMX and VP of Community at Bevy, at 5 p.m. Irish time. We will send details on. And Mark, one of the questions that came in was around go-to-market strategies for startups. But seeing as I know you're doing a talk for Scale Ireland on that exact topic on May 11th from 11 to 12, anyone interested in hearing from Mark again and hearing some more stories, to check out Scale Ireland. They're launching their Slack channel. Yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye. Bye.